Can't tell. Is our chancellor here? Great. Welcome. This is the State Budget Committee, and we're having our September meeting here at Purdue Northwest. I call this the Planes, Trains, Automobiles, and Buses tour because we've used all of those facilities in the last 2 days. And we've had some good visits and some really, I think, productive visits with Gary School Corporation and East Chicago Schools, and Senator Italian hosted us for a ride on the NICTE train, and that was good. And we went out to the Gary Airport, and last night we went to Valparaiso University and had a chance to visit one of our fine independent colleges. We're going to have our business meeting here and start in a few minutes, but first I'd like to ask the Chancellor of Purdue Northwest, Tom Keon, if he would come forward and just give us a few thoughts and perhaps a welcoming comment. Mr. Chancellor.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff of Purdue University Northwest, we welcome you to our Westville campus. As many of you know, Purdue University Northwest is a function of the merger between two existing Purdue campuses, one that was historically in Hammond and this facility here in Westville. As a result of that, we found ourselves a year ago as the 5th largest university in the state because of the merger. It's been a very exciting and successful year for us. We are very dedicated to providing high-quality academic programs to the citizens of Northwest Indiana and to student success. If we bring students in, we want them to finish, we want them to be successful, and we want them to be productive economic drivers in the state of Indiana. So with that, we're very, very pleased to have you here. Appreciate all you have done for our university and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. I have to comment that the facility here that we're in just looks, not only is it a beautiful building, but it's certainly in great condition. And I know you've been through a lot the last couple of years with the merger, but I think we're working to make things better for all our students here, and we appreciate your efforts and your faculty's efforts on their behalf. So thank you. Before we begin the actual meeting, I think we need to go around and have everybody introduce themselves if we could. We'll start with Zach over there and work our way around the table.
Zach Jackson, Deputy Budget Director.
Deanna Owari, Deputy Budget Director.
State Representative Bob Cherry, alternate on the State Budget Committee.
Susan Preble, Fiscal Analyst for the Senate Democrat Caucus.
Karen Talion, Democrat appointment to the Budget Committee, and welcome to Senate District 4.
Ben Tooley, Fiscal Analyst for the House Republican Caucus.
Tim Brown, State Representative, District 41, Chairman of Ways and Means Budget Committee.
Jason Dudich, State Budget Director for Governor Holcomb.
Luke Kenley, State Senate District 20, Chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate and current member of the Budget Committee.
David Reynolds, Fiscal Analyst, Senate Republican Caucus.
Ryan Mishler, Senate District 9.
Terry Gooden, State Representative, District 66, down in southern Indiana.
Eric Gonzalez, House Democrat, Fiscal Analyst.
Jessica Harmon, Deputy Director, Office of Fiscal Management Analysis, Legislative Services Agency.
Big title. Thank you all for being here. I'll call the meeting to order, and the minutes of the last meeting have been distributed. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Is there been moved and seconded? We adopt the minutes. Can we take that by consent? Thank you. A proposed agenda has been distributed to all the members and released to the public. Are there any amendments to the proposed agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is placed on the table for discussion, And we will begin with the agency projects that we have here. First is Matt Kent from the Department of Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Get this set. Mike Smith was upset about it earlier. IDOA's got 2 items on the agenda this morning. The first one is an annual release of R&R payments for IDOA to IFA managed facilities. These facilities were originally bonded through the IFA. A portion of the original bond payments went to fund the long-term capital planning for these buildings. Now that those bonds have been defeased, we continue to make the R&R payments to fund the long-term capital needs of these buildings. The buildings listed on the agenda are as follows: Government Center North and South, the Government Center parking garages, and the Forensic Lab. Those are all general fund. And then Rockville and Pendleton Juvenile Correctional, those are funded from post-war construction fund. I said this is an annual release, so I come before you every year to ask for these.
Any questions for Matt on item number 1? Not, let's go to item number 2.
Okay, item number 2 is the Indiana War Memorial Building roof. I came before Budget Committee last August and requested $1 million for initial design and scope of work for this project. Of that $1 million, we spent $140,000 on design work. We knew that with the intricate nature of this roof, we wanted to make sure we had the design and the scope completely kind of outlined before we came back and asked for the full appropriation. With that design work finishing up, Public Works is comfortable coming before you and asking for the remaining $2.9 million to begin work on this project. So I handed out a picture of the roof just so you get an idea of the nature and the scale of what we're dealing with here. It's a stair-step roof with limestone blocks and copper treads that go all the way up the roof. Due to time and weathering, the copper treads and the limestone have actually begun to deteriorate. So the work we're proposing will go in and replace and repair any of those limestone blocks where needed. We'll also replace all of that tread that's deteriorated. Once that's done, we'll put a waterproof membrane underneath the limestone and then come in and seal the whole roof. We'll also look at doing some of the drainage system, making sure that's working efficiently so that water's moving away from the roof as it should. There's some lower level roofs, not nearly as intricate as the top, that we'll replace in this work as well. If approved, we hope to begin this work in 2018 in spring.
Any questions for Matt? Yes.
Matt, quick question. On the $1 million design fees, while that was approved by the Budget Committee, not all of those funds were utilized. The remaining amount will be repurposed to help with the cost of the project, is that correct?
We asked for $1 million. One was to get the design work, but then also just in case any emergencies came up in between. So the remainder of that money will go towards the full project.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Next, item number 3, the Indiana State Police. We have Major Jerry Williams and Captain Gary Murphy.
Good morning.
Morning.
We are asking for your consideration and approval for one of our capital projects. That project in this case is for our security electronic systems. We have we have 14 facilities across the state that our goal is to integrate some security measures that is probably long overdue. Right now, for the most part, our systems are pretty much an obsolete system, which is just a traditional key and lock system itself, with the exceptions, of course, of our regional laboratory systems, which are at the Lowell, Fort Wayne, and Evansville locations. Those facilities do have a monitoring system on them, but it's primarily limited to just the laboratory facility portion itself. So the remainder of the buildings are still left exposed as far as intrusions and vandalism, et cetera. So our goal here is to integrate these systems. We took the liberty about 15 months ago to do a prototype program with our Pendleton Post, where we used the state of Indiana's card reader access program and integrated that with a video system and a monitoring capabilities that we monitor real time out of our Indianapolis regional dispatch center that has proven to be very efficient. So our goal is to mirror that concept and across the state for these other facilities in and of itself. So again, we would ask your consideration for that.
Any questions for Major Williams? Major, a big part of our budget discussion this last time was a consideration of a substantial pay raise across the board for the state police, and I know this is not on the agenda, but hopefully you all are in the process of getting that implemented, and it's helping for the good of the department at this point. Can you give us any feedback there?
Senator, I would tell you that I've been on this department now just short of 24 years. This pay raise has been a historical pay raise for us as an agency. We've never seen anything like it, and what it has done for the morale of the troopers and the ability for troopers for us to be able to try and retain troopers and hire more qualified troopers. We are already seeing the positive effects of that of those efforts. So this pay raise is definitely something that puts us on the mainstream with other state agencies across the country, and even locally as we competed against other agencies that were able to attract not only more qualified applicants itself, but this allows us now too, we're seeing an increase even in our diversity and our minority recruiting efforts as well too, so.
Well, great. It's a big investment, and that's what we hope it'll do, so thank you for the feedback.
On behalf of all of us from the state police and every senator, every representative, which is my understanding supported these efforts, we are truly grateful for it to each of you.
Oh, we're glad to do it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Department of Natural Resources, Mike Smith. You've got, what, 4 items here, Mike?
Yes, DNR has 4 items on today's agenda. Prior to that, I would like to echo the major's comments for DNR's conservation
Great.
officers as well. Thank you so much. DNR's first project on the list here is the roof repair and replacement for Turkey Run Inn. The Division of State Parks is requesting $1.2 million to repair and replace portions of the 36,000 square foot roof of the Turkey Run Inn. The roof is 38 years old and consists of 2 distinct roof types. Multiple attempts to repair the roof by DNR labor has been unsuccessful. A recent evaluation of the roofing components resulted in the recommendation of addressing the deficiencies through repair and replacement, as well as reinforcement of the exterior brick wall. The expected life of these repairs is 20 to 30 years. Fiscal year 2016 occupancy rate of the inn was 70%, and it generated $3.3 million in revenue.
Questions on item number 4? Okay, let's go to number 5, Mike.
State Parks General Rehab. The Division of State Parks is requesting $2.8 million to meet general rehab needs at approximately 30 properties. The request would fund close to 60 projects statewide to include sidewalk replacement, trail restoration and maintenance, vault toilets, bathroom repairs, electrical upgrades, to name a few. The Division of State Parks and Reservoirs generated over $32 million in fiscal year 2017.
Questions on number 5? Yes, Senator Talion.
Mike, you mentioned that we're at $32 million. How is that compared to other years?
That's the highest that we've seen. The prior fiscal year was $30 million, and the prior to that was 26. We had a gate fee increase, I believe, in May of 2015, as well as some campsite increases, and it's been very successful.
That must be one of those tax increases that Republicans are being held accountable for.
1 of 44.
Tax and spend conservatives.
Okay,
Number 3,
yes, Mike. Let's move on. Good comment.
there we go. CR&R project labor. The Division of Nature Preserves is requesting $228,000 for labor costs to control burns to preserve habitat and control the risk of wildfires. Also included in this labor request are projects to ensure visitor safety, such as tree removal. These funds would support approximately 20,000 hours of labor at $11 per hour.
Questions on item number 6? Yes, Senator Talion.
One more.
Good.
Mike, do you use summer labor with interns as part of that intern program?
Part of that, but most of these are permanent employees.
Okay. all
Yes.
right.
Any other questions? And last,
New Lake Dam repair. The Division of Water requests $200,000 to repair the spillway and embankment of the New Lake Dam in Fort Harrison State Park. This dam assists in protecting the water quality of Delaware Lake, which is the main recreational, area for the park and is used as the property's sole water source for the Fort Harrison Golf Course. The golf course generates approximately $1.5 million in sales revenue annually. The dam has overtopped several times in recent years and has an uneven crest and has experienced large amounts of erosion. The requested funding would stabilize the dam and meet current dam safety standards.
Mike, do you have any idea how old the New Lake Dam is?
Boy, I probably have it in my notes back there, but not off the top of my head, no.
Would you regard it as new?
No. Good point.
Well, maybe we need to rename it the Mike
Yeah,
Smith Dam.
there we go, there we go.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? Thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Okay, Indiana State Museum, Laura Menzies, is that? Menz?
Menz.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Project before you today is to provide very important repairs to the mansion's foundation, particularly focusing on the south portico, which support the massive columns that are indicative of the Greek Revival architecture, and the pediment above. Limestone will be repaired and replaced as appropriate. Important mortar repointing will give strength and prevent leaks, and the floor of the popular south portico will be repaired. We will be letting this project for bid very soon, and will implement construction in spring of 2018. I'd like to thank you for your consideration today.
Questions for Laura? Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Are a lot of the visitors to the Lanier Mansion, are they school-age children? Because how much traffic do you get?
We get approximately 60 to 70,000 through the mansion each year. That's a variety of visitors. We have quite a few actually adults through the because of our location right on the Ohio River. We have quite a few adults that come on the American Queen and other riverboats that stop in Madison. We also have a good portion of students as well. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. The Kankakee River Basin Commission, Jody Melton.
Good morning. I'm here to ask for the release of $600,000 for the Kankakee River Basin Commission. We have a series of projects we've been working on. We've partnered with the U.S. Geological Survey and NIPSCO to put a series of sediment monitors and stream gauge monitors in the Kankakee to look for the sediment and also water quality. We have several projects in different counties on the riverbanks. Most of the projects that we have on the Kankakee require Corps permits and DNR permits and IDEM permits, and it takes quite a while to push those through. I don't like to come before the committee and ask for money until I'm ready to spend it, but we're ready to spend this money, so I'd ask for you to release that.
Questions for Jody? Senator Italian.
Jody, how many counties does the commission?
8.
8?
8.
And are you going to be able to do these projects, this bank restoration stuff this year?
Yes. Yes, we will.
Okay. Just wondered.
We have, in the 2017 appropriation, we have more money that we're going to start looking at spending that too, but this money we can spend pretty much this year.
Thank you.
Jody, do you ever read the DNR magazine?
Yes.
Did you see the article that they had about the Kankakee River Basin 3 months ago?
No, I didn't.
Well, you know, I think it would be good for you to read that, and I'd be interested to kind of know they kind of went through the history and a perspective from a DNR standpoint about that. And I think it would be interesting to have your take on that for members of the committee to some extent. That's probably the most detailed historical explanation that I had seen, and I wasn't quite sure that I was connecting all the dots with everything that we've worked with you all on this effort. So take a look at that.
The Kankakee is a very complicated system, as you well know.
Well, it was an interesting article.
And after the last budget session with our conversations, it's interesting that the 8 counties are now sitting down and saying, well, maybe we can't depend on the state for all our funding. We're going to have to start looking for funding for our own.
Well, I'm glad you gave them that message. Yeah.
The message has been heard, and we're working on it.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Next, the Department of Correction, Kevin Orm. And Kevin, you have 1, 2, 3 items. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
The first project from the Department of Correction is for radio communications upgrade and replacement at 2 of our facilities. In our facilities where the officers don't carry guns, they may carry a chemical weapon, but they don't carry guns. The basis for our safety is our radio communication system. Over the last 2 bienniums, I've brought projects before the committee and received approval. We're doing a systematic upgrade and refurbishment of all of our systems, not only for handheld radios, but the system also includes everything from antennas to the cable that connects the antennas to the new transmitters and receivers. It's actually a full renovation and restoration of all of the systems. This is for the last 2 phases, phase 6 and 7 of this project. This will complete the renovation of all the IDOC communication facilities.
Questions on item 10? Senator Talley.
Sorry, it's not, Kevin, it's not about this, but it's just a question in general. You've got your projects here. Why is it, and I should have asked earlier, why is it that Department of Administration has 2 projects under them at Rockville and at Pendleton? Why aren't those your projects?
They're conducted through the Finance Authority. Mr. Kent and specifically Brian Renner and his group and I work hand in hand. It's just, that would be an answer for the funding stream, but we work hand in hand to affect those projects. Just because the DOA is up representing the Finance Authority, for those, ma'am, the projects are actually managed jointly between our 2 agencies. It's just the funding stream.
Okay, just wondered.
Yeah, in fact, I've talked to them probably a dozen times already this morning on some projects, so hand in hand.
Okay.
We don't care what our IDs say, we're all in this together. It's kind of the way we look at it.
Other questions, comments?
The next project is for 3 subcomponent projects at the Indiana State Prison. It's been my pleasure to take members of the committee through the Indiana State Prison on several occasions. I've included a blue folder that has some photographs in it that will illustrate these 3 projects in front of you. The ICE cell house was built in 1925. Obviously, it's inside our walled penitentiary. It houses just under 300 maximum security offenders. When it was constructed, the brick was obtained from another prison. I'm not going to, I'm sure that was my many predecessors ago. I'm not going to question his quality control, but they didn't fire the brick enough. So over the last 100 years, it's lost some of its integrity. We looked at a number of ways to fix this. There's nothing wrong with the cell house. I toured the cell house Monday of this week, spent some time walking the ranges. There's nothing at all wrong with the cell houses, the internal arrangements, even after its 100 years of existence. To repair this exterior, which is not structural, by the way, it's all just a matter of keeping the weather out. There's nothing structural, although the photographs look pretty dramatic. It really isn't. It's just a matter of keeping the weather out and preventing more degradation of the building exterior. A couple things we looked at were replacing the brick. Inside that facility, we're already doing a lot of brick masonry projects using offender labor, teaching them, the ones that will get out from that unique facility, teaching some of them that will get out a very marketable trade and others that will never get out, trying to keep them occupied and constructive. So we're already doing a lot of restoration. Because of the height of this building, we chose to put this project together using outside labor for most of it. We will do some of the preparatory work. We've already done some of the preparatory work. But the two things we'll do, we'll stabilize the exterior on I-Cell House, and then we'll actually put metal siding onto I-Cell House that will absolutely preserve it for the rest of its life, however long that may be.
Questions? Well, it was our pleasure to visit and be able to leave.
Thank you, sir.
Number 12.
The final project is a small project, a small roof on a chapel facility inside the Plainfield Correctional Facility in Hendricks County. The small chapel has a rather unique roof on it that some designers designed in 1968, an act that I don't really want to follow. The way they brought the seams of some of the roofs together, we're going to have to go back and change the way some of the roofs are knitted together to make the building drain right. They also then, at some point in the facility's history, put 2 rooftop air conditioning units on it and did that improperly, causing even more structural failure to the building. So this project actually corrects all of those deficiencies, puts a new roof on that should have a 40-year plus lifespan, and relocates the air conditioning units as well.
Questions? Item number 12. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
for all
sir.
your good work. Department of Transportation, Steve McAvoy.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. NDOT has 4 projects on the agenda today. The first one is a statewide HVAC replacement projects. We formally request funding in the amount of $108,000 for the replacement of 2 HVAC units. One of these units is at the Greenfield District Complex, and the other is at the Indianapolis Subdistrict. The HVAC unit at the Greenfield Complex has exceeded its life expectancy of 20 years, and further repair costs would not be effective at extending its life cycle. The HVAC unit at Indianapolis Subdistrict is 12 years old, but recently experienced significant hail damage to the coils, which rendered the unit non-repairable. In addition to these 2 HVAC units, we had an HVAC unit in the Vincennes District, which has recently failed and was approved through the admin action as a cost-effective measure to offset the cost of the rental of portable air conditioning units.
Questions? Number 14.
We also have statewide roof replacements on the agenda. We formally request funding in the amount of $579,612 for the replacement of 11 roofs at various NDOT locations across the state. These roof replacements will address structural, environmental, and operational issues. The average age of the roofs is 22 years and reflect salt dome shingled roofs, some EPDM roofs, and some modified bitumen roofs. Patching of these roofs has occurred over time in an effort to extend their life cycle. However, recent roof assessments identified significant defects beyond the routine preventative maintenance and necessitate replacement.
Any questions? Number 15.
We seek $2,750,000 for the construction of the new Logansport unit building. The construction is for a 5,822 square foot unit building. The new building will replace an existing 3,162 square foot unit building that was built in 1966 and will be constructed on the existing site. The existing unit building does not allow for OSHA-approved work clearances, proper ventilation in the garage space. In addition, the age and condition of the structure has contributed to operational and environmental issues such as ADA accessibility, insufficient electrical service, truck washing, site drainage, and stormwater runoff, lead paint, and some asbestos contamination. Construction of the new unit will mitigate all these concerns while keeping in line with the current industry standards of pricing for similar NDOT unit buildings. Upon completion of the unit building, the existing unit building will be demolished.
Any questions? Okay, and last, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Senator Tyan.
You ought to just look this way, Luke, because
Yeah.
is this going on the same spot, in the same area?
It's basically just to the south of the existing building. So we're going to keep the existing unit open while we construct this so they can operate on the site. And then when the new building is completed and accepted, we'll just tear down the unit,
All right,
the old
but
unit.
it's all on your.
All on the same property.
Same, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, the last project we have is the construction of a equipment storage building at our Central Materials and Testing location in Indianapolis. We formally request funding in the amount of $140,000 for the construction of a new 1,200 square foot equipment storage building. Existing conditioned garage space that was used for equipment storage in the Materials and Testing building has been recently repurposed for the new NDOT hot mix asphalt lab. Due to this repurposing, there is a need for an insulated and heated storage building to maintain various NDOT assets. The $116 square foot estimated cost is in line with prior constructed similar storage buildings.
Any questions? Well, I think you're all busy with the new money we found for the roads. I'm
Yeah.
seeing orange in my sleep every night.
That's good.
Drive around the state.
My counterparts are doing it.
Well, it's a great development. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Number 17, Indiana State Fair Commission, David Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity to present before you today. The 2017 Great Indiana State Fair is wrapping up this weekend, and we've been blessed with wonderful weather that's resulted in record crowds for the opening Saturday and the first Tuesday of the fair this year. The biennial budget for fiscal years 2018-2019 includes a total appropriation of $4 million for R&R. I'm here today to ask for $2 million of the appropriation be released for projects scheduled in fiscal year 2018. The $2 million will be used for badly needed R&R projects that have been deferred in fiscal year 2017. Those projects include replacing HVAC control units in 3 buildings, replacing condensing and gas-fired units in 2 buildings, and doing major water heater repairs in 2 buildings. We'll also be doing LED lighting upgrades that will significantly reduce electrical cost, replacing electrical panels in multiple buildings, and replacing exit signs so that they meet fire marshal codes. We'll be doing major tuck pointing and window glass block repairs in 2 buildings, and rebuilding of pilasters in another building. We'll also be doing complete roof replacements of 2 buildings and roofing repairs on 2 other buildings, and finally doing repairs needed for ADA access to several buildings. These projects were recommended in a facility assessment recently completed by the A&E firm Smith and Associates. Needed repairs cataloged in the assessment were ranked by urgency. All projects submitted today were considered most urgent. As mentioned, these projects have been deferred, and we're eager to begin the repair and replacement immediately after the conclusion of the 2017 fair. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present, and happy to answer any questions.
David, when you upgrade to the LED lighting, I know in a lot of private buildings, we're able to get some rebates or cost share from utilities. Does that work for you, or do you have your own power plants, or how?
You have to, there's a program with IPL where
Okay.
your rates are set on whether or not you're going to participate
Okay.
in the rebate program. And at this point, the cost of the increase in the rates has not been a fiscally sound decision for us when compared to the cost, when you compare the rate
Sure.
rebates of the
So
increase.
you investigated that?
Yes,
and-
we did.
Okay,
Yes. We have
good.
used it in the past, but currently it's not.
Great. Any other questions?
That means solar.
Solar.
We have a couple solar panels there, small ones. Yeah.
Better get them built for you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Turning to the university projects, Indiana University, Tom Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My pleasure to be with you this morning. Before I get started, I wanted to take the opportunity, and I mentioned this to Budget Director Dudich before the meeting, wanted to impress upon you our appreciation from Indiana University, President McRobbie, and our Board of Trustees for whatever work that you did, or for the support of Governor Holcomb, and particularly our colleagues at NDOT, for getting all 4 lanes open on State Road 37/I-69 from Martinsville to Bloomington. Realize that that project has been a challenge for you all, but we've seen some definite progress this summer, all summer long, and NDOT had pledged to us that they thought they could get it get it opened in time for the school year to start. This was move-in week, and all reports were just great. So we just wanted to say thank you.
Great.
First project I have for you today is, both projects are for the Bloomington campus. The first project is a new volleyball wrestling arena for our Department of Athletics on the Bloomington campus. The volleyball and wrestling teams currently participate in an old high school gym north of the Bloomington campus that was the old university school gymnasium built 50-some years ago. We are now attempting to bring them back onto the campus in between what is Assembly Hall and one of the large residence hall complexes. It'll neatly fit. It'll be 3,000 seats. If you would like a comparison in terms of size, it is not unlike the gymnasium that you see here, not this entire building, but the gymnasium here. In terms of its size, it'll be only used for volleyball and wrestling and for some summer camp activity. It will be, as I said, 3,000 seats, locker rooms, and other amenities for spectator facilities. $17 million funded by both athletics and gift funds. And I anticipated the possible question as to what it cost to build Assembly Hall a long time ago. And the assumption might have been that what we're paying today to build a little 3,000-seat volleyball gym was what we paid to build Assembly Hall 50-some years ago, and it's pretty darn close. The number for just Assembly Hall was $15 million. The total project to do this whole surrounding area was about 26.
Oh, my God.
When we priced out replacing Assembly Hall before we did our renovation a few years ago, which was $35 million, it was about $250 million to replace. So sometime in about 50 years, someone after me will be before you requesting a new volleyball gym for about $150 million. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I think that says it all. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So if you do the division, it's pretty pricey per square foot. Why is an open arena seemingly so pricey per
It's the volume. So while your floor space may be only 45,000 square feet, you're basically going 3 stories in the air. And so that's what leads to it. We did test the price. So we have, we just opened about a year ago a small gymnasium at our East Campus in Richmond. And that one is about 1,000 seats, same general, and that one was $5 million. And so this one's about 3 times the size.
And it's a leaseback arrangement. What will be the R&R once it comes back to the university, or what will be the R&R as it's in the lease period?
The R&R is strictly the responsibility of the university, strictly athletics, so it's not within our state R&R formula at all. But the R&R will be the responsibility there, so we figure that in from the beginning.
Senator Italian?
Yeah, can you just run through this certificates of participation financing again? So the athletic department revenues plus gifts will pay these lease payments, and so these sort of certificates of participation, who buys those? The building corporation?
They're sold by the building corporation, issued by the building corporation to people who would buy bonds the same way you would sell bonds. The certificates of participation, another way of, it's in the family of selling bonds. As I've talked about before, this comes up frequently in this setting. The reason that we've done this, and we do it with total transparency to bring it all before you, is that our ability to sell bonds for these types of projects that are not state-funded is very cumbersome. And so this was a method that we developed with your participation many, many years ago to allow us to bond for projects like this that are not funded by the state, but still allow us to borrow. And this is the vehicle that we utilize to do that.
Yeah, and I make you explain it to me almost every time.
So What kind of market rate do you anticipate on that, Tom?
I just asked our folks that question yesterday. It's probably going to be in the mid-threes. The last time we issued, we were about 3.7, and it's come down just a little bit, but
Okay.
by the time we issue.
So when you do that, a lot of the public bond issuances involve a fairly thick document. I don't know what they call those, indentures or whatever
Right.
they are.
Right.
Does this have a similar
It does.
structure to it?
Yes.
So there's a lot of legalities
Yes.
about, okay. Yeah, Budget Director Dude.
Tom, along those lines, how is the IUBC rated, or is the university's credit rating aligned with the IUBC with those?
The university's credit rating is aligned with the IUBC.
Thank you.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you. Just follow up, $17 million, could the athletic department cash fund this? Do we ever see what financial statements are for the athletic department?
Our board does. At least once a year, they do a full report. They would probably not have the ability to cash fund that without making some other serious adjustments within their budget. So given where we are with fundraising and debt, it makes sense at this point in time. If the interest rates were double what they are, maybe we'd have some other discussions.
Okay, well, that takes care of wrestling. Let's turn to bells and whistles now.
Second project is also on the Bloomington campus. It is the renovation and relocation of the Mets Carillon. I have, for staff over the last couple of months, had many questions as in, what's a carillon? Carillon is a bell tower. And the carillon on the Bloomington campus was built in the 1960s on the north edge of campus at the highest point of the campus. And it was thought at the time that the campus would somewhat grow in that direction. It did not. And so the carillon stayed alone at the top of the hill. The structure around the carillon has been deteriorating, and we need to replace that. So it made sense for us to look at tearing down the existing structure that holds the bells, redesign and relocate that structure in the middle of the campus, which is what we are intending to do. We would utilize the existing bells, have them refurbished, add 4 bells to it, and it would become a 65-bell carillon. Many universities and many places in the country have bell towers or carillons. I can say with confidence we are one of the few places that has a school of music that teaches people how to play the carillon and we can have our own people play the carillon. And so it'll be a great to be able to fully utilize the carillon. Again, we are restricted to this project is $7 million. Completely funded by gifts, and this is a good story in that the Mets Foundation, which originally funded the Carillon, had given us additional money at the time to fund future renovation and replacement cost, and that's where the money comes from.
Great. Questions? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have Purdue. Tony Hahn, your projects aren't nearly as exciting. Basement renovation.
They really aren't, no. Good morning, Tony Hahn with Purdue University. I only have one project for your consideration today, Hampton Hall ground floor and basement renovation. This is a 15,000 square foot project that involves the ground floor of our civil engineering building. This contains a materials testing lab. Also, the LTAP program has many of their faculty based there as they do materials testing for civil engineering and roads. This Hampton Hall was first built in 1950, and so this renovation reconfigures some of the laboratory space into much more modern lab space and more of a teaching laboratory. It also renovates the materials testing lab and removes some equipment, some testing equipment that's obsolete. Importantly, this adds ADA accessibility to the building, and it is funded $4.9 million from gifts, and then a small $130,000 from funds that we dedicate to upgrading older buildings every year for ADA accessibility. Total project cost is just over $5 million. Any questions?
Questions for Tony? Mr. Chairman, Chairman
Thank you.
Brown.
Thank you for you said the Purdue General Fund expenditures because of upgrading for disability requirements and things like that. Where is the revenue source that goes into the general fund from this?
So a little background about those, what we listed as ADA funds there. Each year, the treasurer allocates a certain amount of money, last year was about $600,000, to different departments or colleges to upgrade their facilities as they're doing renovations for ADA accessibility. That comes from the general, what we call internally the general fund. And the general fund is a collection of different revenue sources that we call internally our general fund. So that could be R&R dollars from our mandatory student fee. That could be R&R dollars from the state. It could be tuition dollars. It could be F&A recovery that we've talked about before. So given the topic of ADA accessibility and the importance of it across all departments of campus, it comes from that general fund and is allocated out to the departments for their use.
Thank you. I guess that brings me to, are you having discussions with the commission and internally about how to be more consistent in this? Because I went through and looked at past budget notes and I see, you know, R&R listed by itself, R&R student fees, R&R general fund, R&R budget, central reserves.
Don't
They
forget
have been
institutional
titled, as I
reserve
listed
too.
there, 5 different ways just in a year and a half that I looked through budget notes. Where can we get consistency?
We are working on that as we speak. In fact, today, Friday, we will file 8 new projects that our board approved last week. And we've made a very conscious effort, working with Dominic Chase here in the crowd, to make much simpler definitions about where the funds come from. What we have become in the habit of is taking the internal fund name from our board documents and putting them on the state fund. And that doesn't do this committee much good to understand where that money comes from. It helps us internally understand how to track it. But we've recognized that we will be approaching this in a much more simple and consistent way in the future with a naming mechanism that should be very clear where the money comes from, how it's being used, and you should be able to anticipate those titles as it comes forward.
And I guess that, you know, you and I have had these conversations in the past in the, you know, if we label what, you know, general funds, our concern is that operation money that we gave in the state budget, you know, is going away from instructions and helping Indiana students matriculate through Purdue. It's also my concern that we've talked about in the past, F&A, facilities and administration, that's on top of a grant amount, some way get morphed into things that should be used for this project into be used for monies to build new buildings, when in fact they should be used for depreciation and renovation and restoration.
And I think you'll see as we work through those naming, that nomenclature, it should be more clear about how we're spending that F&A recovery. We do tag, or flag rather, the dollars as they come into the university as public or non-public for a very important reason, because there's different investment rules related to it. So when we get a state appropriation, for example, that's always tagged and monitored as public funds. And so as we look at what this naming mechanism is, we'll be sure to designate where those lines are.
Does Purdue operate within its revenue source, or does it have a negative cash flow or a positive cash flow?
I'd say we maintain like the state, we maintain a healthy reserve, just in case. But as you know, we're very successful in our sponsored programs and research and fundraising. And so I think we do end with a balance that is reinvested the next year.
Have your liabilities over the last 5 years that I've been involved gone up or gone down?
Debt liabilities?
Yeah.
We've retired some, but this body has been also very generous. We'll be issuing $104 million in debt, presumably in the next fiscal year. And so our But we've retired some too, so that our annual debt payment has been pretty steady. And that annual debt payment is probably about $93 million or so now on a, $2 billion budget.
Any other questions or comments? Budget Director Dudich.
Tony, the discussion you're having with the commission on the labeling and the standardization of where the funds are, what's the time frame that you and the other institutions in the commission hope to come up with something? And is there a document that'll be sent to the budget committee to kind of lay out what that discussion has been and what the decision has been, or is it too preliminary at this point to determine time frame and how that will end up?
I think it may be a little too preliminary as we find out what labels are helpful for both the commission and for this body, and then what is also descriptive enough that it captures what we want too. So as I mentioned before, we'll be filing 8 new projects today, and that will be our first attempt at I think, updating some of this naming, this nomenclature. And so we'll see if that, we'll find our way with some guardrails, and I would say by, throughout this fiscal year, we'll get to something we can all live with, I hope.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or question? I think Chairman Brown is touching on some, as people who put together budgets for the state, some kind of continuing questions in 2 areas. Number one is sort of identification of funds and where they come from, so that we do have a comfort factor about being able to understand that. But I do think the other one is, and it hasn't been too severe of a problem in recent years because interest rates have been low and it's been appropriate to be doing building, but that will not continue forever. And so I think that his questions and comments about due diligence on debt and those kind of things are things that we need to be sort of ready to be alert about, and your board needs to be on top of that. So I think that's good discussion.
And we just completed our annual meeting with IFA, where we reviewed all of our outstanding debt. Those certificates of participation are also listed in those, and that's a good exercise every year as well with different levels of government.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Chairman Brown.
In that discussion, were lease payments included as far as your debt load?
They are.
Okay.
Their lease obligations are.
Good. All right. Thank you, Tony. Okay, those are the university projects, and we're going to turn to review items. So we have the Medicaid State Plan Amendment. Allison Taylor, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. I've got a handful of items for you today. I'm the Interim Medicaid Director of Indiana's Family and Social Services Administration Office of Medicaid Policy and Planning. It's a lot to say. First, I'd like to start, I'll go in line with your agenda. We've got the opioid treatment program. We are seeking a state plan amendment through the federal government to do something that is actually really exciting for our agency and I think for the governor's office in adding a bundled reimbursement rate for opioid treatment programs. This is a direct result of one of the governor's pillars to attack the drug epidemic. We know that almost 100,000 individuals on Medicaid had an SUD diagnosis last year alone, and we are really trying to step up our state's efforts to help Hoosiers. And so this, by amending our state plan, we're going to create a bundled rate and include some case management services to really try to bend the curve and the trajectory of the path that we are on. And you'll see there is a fiscal impact associated with this modification for state fiscal year 2019. It'll be about $3.5 million in state budget.
Questions on this item? I would just comment generally, Allison. We are heading towards a situation where we're not sure what the fate of the HIP 2.0 plan is or what the federal reimbursement is going to be. And so that's going to be a huge issue for our next budget. And this is probably a pretty needed and legitimate increase in our fiscal impact. I hope the agency will keep your eye on that kind of monster that's looming out there for us as we kind of consider these plan amendments and deal with it. It's very helpful for you all to come to the Budget Committee and give us these continuous reports. It's pretty complicated and somewhat hard to understand from our perspective, but I think it's good that we be aware of things.
Yeah, I think at this time especially, we all need to be on the same page, and whatever we can do to educate. It is complex. I'm a health law attorney and I'm still learning. So absolutely, and health reform is, we have constant conversations about that, so
Great.
absolutely.
Next item.
Okay, the next item is.
Oh,
the
I'm
re-
sorry, Senator
Oh.
Talion does have a question or
Hi,
a
S-
comment.
Hi, Senator.
Thank you. I may be behind the group on this, but bundled reimbursement rate, that means you're paying one rate. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so that means that we're paying a bundled rate. We're gonna have one rate, and within that, we're gonna have a whole basket of services.
Okay.
That's gonna allow the programs to treat an individual, not just not about the drug or the administration of it. It includes case management and all the other ancillary tests and things that go along with, and trying to take more of a holistic approach.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
Okay. So the next item, intern reimbursement, is actually the result of legislation from 2016, House Enrolled Act 1347, which directed our agency to provide medical interns the opportunity to bill for Medicaid reimbursement, and this is long, so bear with me, for outpatient mental health services provided to Medicaid beneficiaries in a community mental health center under the supervision of a physician. All that means that we're creating a category of reimbursement for interns to kind of extend what a physician can do in the community mental health center setting. I think the policy behind this, and we would agree, is that, access particularly to outpatient mental health services in our CMHCs is needed. So whatever we can do to extend that and create more opportunities to have access to cover, to a physician or an intern is a good endeavor. So this is the result. It is a small fiscal impact. For instance, state fiscal year 2018, the state budget impacts about $240,000.
Any questions, comments?
Just a question.
Yes, Senator Talion.
Does this mean that the physicians get paid, or the interns and students get paid?
So I don't know that I know exactly the billing, the process, and Dr. Brown's probably thinking, I know this answer, lady. But it gives them the opportunity to bill. I am sure that they're working through and under the physician. It probably goes to the group or the facility. But I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Maybe it encourages a physician to work more with the interns. They'll bring in more folks.
I mean, clarification, it probably goes to the mental health center as overall operational revenue, and so then they have to decide it out. I mean, there's a cost to bring in interns and practicum students type of thing.
And so maybe this is incentive to bring on a few interns.
Thank you.
Ready?
Next.
Okay, next one, we are seeking a state plan amendment to extend the quality assessment fee. And my understanding is that, we do this every 2 years, so this is nothing new to the team here, but we're seeking to extend it through June 30th, 2019. No fiscal impact, because we are not changing any of the calculations within the quality assessment fee.
Thank you. Yes, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Allison. Do you have any contacts at the federal level to say that this is an area of concern of continued federal funding or not, or?
So we feel pretty good in that generally, we're not maximizing the quality assessment fee, and to the extent there's conversations about lowering the threshold at which any of our fees can function, both programs are well below, so no. But that being said, to Senator Kenley's point, absolutely we are mindful of it and watching, because you never know where that conversation will go.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
All right, so the final two are related, and these are amendments to our waivers with the federal government. These are the result of legislation passed this year that required our office to provide a 5% provider rate increase to direct service providers under Indiana's Medicaid waiver programs. And so this item and the next are actually our two HCBS waivers. So this mandate to increase reimbursement applies to both. And we can start with the first, which is the CIH waiver. It has the largest impact. It is our larger waiver. So for state fiscal year, it's about 7.68 million. And I will say that, but for this and the next waiver, this was included in our April forecast. So be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Dr. Brown, refresh my memory. Didn't you change some terminology in the budget bill so that we wouldn't be using the same language that we had about, we were talking about paying more for services, but the advocates were talking about how this was a cut, and the reality was it didn't quite work that way. And so I thought we kind of changed the terminology so it was just a little more clear going forward what was being done here.
Yeah, well, direct service providers, we funded it in the budget to get the increase. There was, you know, a 3%, in the past, we did a 3% increase from a 3% reduction, but when you do a 3% increase on a lower base, you didn't get it all the way. So that was in past things that we made that correct.
I don't know, Senator Kinley, are you mentioning the concern that consumer or recipients, their access to services may have gone down by the increase in rates? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, I'm not really sure. I was so confused by the whole thing as we tried to discuss it during the session, and I thought we were trying to get the thing cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I do know that we, in this, Medicaid partners with our Division of Disability and Rehab Services to administer this waiver. So we did work together to adjust the caps to make sure that with the provider rate increase, services would ideally not be negatively impacted because it's a.
In this fiscal impact here, we did approve that statutorily.
Right.
And we did provide for the funding in the budget. Is that not correct?
Yes, which we appreciate, yes.
And I specifically remember in the Appropriations Committee asking the department if they agreed with that approach or not. And so it seemed like we're all on the same page.
I think so.
Okay. Yes, Chairman Brown.
And so one of the concerns of the providers, so that the money gets to the direct service providers, because that's ultimately, it was a workforce access issue.
That's right.
There. We haven't been paying these increased rates because we haven't changed our waiver?
Yeah, not yet.
Pardon?
Not yet. This type of change will be prospective. So as soon as we get the approval from CMS, then we can move forward. And we've been in constant conversation with the industry, including ARC and NARC, so they're aware of what the plan and timing is.
Okay.
Yeah. As soon as possible. We're trying to move very quickly. And so that applies to the family supports waiver. So that conversation is the same. The fiscal impact on the family support is far less at about 1.2 million. And again, that was in the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Complicated stuff, but we appreciate you being here to help us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Public Broadcasting Disbursement, Roger Rhodes. Good to have you here, Roger.
Good to be here, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for a couple of minutes to speak to you about the appropriation. First of all, on behalf of the 8 PBS affiliates and 9 NPR radio stations across the state and all of the people, the millions that they serve, thank you for your consideration in the most recent session of the General Assembly. As a result, give you a brief report of where we hope to go. Beyond the national programs that I know you're familiar with and we've spoken about often, the stations will be able to remain focused on their three-legged stool of service in education, citizenship, and community engagement. Among other things, we do look forward to continuing to present state agency content and assist them with getting the word out. Things like the State of the State address, State of the Judiciary address, and now we have a new tradition of State of Higher Education address and others. So we look forward to continuing that. There is a great deal to the story about what the stations are doing in each of their communities as they work with local agencies to address local issues, and we think that's a great way to begin to find some solutions to some of the challenges that each of our communities face. But in the interest of time, I'll move forward and present the formula for funding. The request that you received follows the same distribution formula that was worked out most recently in 2007 and 2009 with then state budget agency leadership. We don't suggest any change in the formula at this time, but for each year of the biennium, the General Assembly appropriated $3,675,000 per year. Of that figure, $525,000, or 1/7, was designated for radio members, the remainder to TV members. And I also understand, after working with Deputy Budget Director Cummings, that those numbers are subject to a 3% reserve to the Treasury. So the chart that you see on page 2 does reflect that 3% reserve, and we're very happy to be continuing good partners with the state to help keep us fiscally sound.
Questions for Roger? Yes, Chairman Brown and then Senator Italian.
Thank you. Just looking, and help me, Indianapolis, in the TV portion gets the largest share, and I certainly understand why largest city, capital city, but South Bend gets the next, and they're not our second largest city. Does it have to be on viewership?
Great question. That actually precedes my time in this role, how this formula was developed. They looked at a number of things, including expenses and market size. A number of factors went into that. Let me give you the whole formula without going too long. First of all, the state leadership then said, each station has a certain baseline set of expenses. So let's take 25% of the allocation and distribute that equally to the TV stations. Then they looked at various expenses of each of the TV stations at that time, as the story's told to me. And they came out with a formula that says, let's take 75% and distribute it according to a factor that the budget staff came up with. Okay. So that's how we end up there today. I can tell you the stations discuss it, and they are comfortable with the way the numbers roll out. But certainly, if a new leadership wants to re-examine that, we're happy to do that with them.
Senator Italian.
Thank you. I just want to preface my remarks, a little disclaimer. I am on the board of Lakeshore Public Broadcasting up here in Northwest Indiana. Yeah. A couple of things. I think that it might be interesting to re-look at the distribution formula. Secondly, I know that all the public broadcasting systems in Indiana are hurting for money. The old approach of fundraising over the radio or over the TV has left a lot of the stations short of money, and I think that that's probably true everywhere. I'm also wanting to understand why you're doing this 3% reserve. We're making a gift to radio public broadcasting, and why are we doing it with the 3% reserve? I don't get that. So I'm trying to advocate that you guys get more money. But I'm just saying that, I wish somebody could tell me why we do a 3% reserve on what's essentially a gift.
Budget Director Dudich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, Senator Talley and I agree. Our office would be happy to work with the public broadcasting to look at that formula, examine it, see if it needs to be revisited. And so we'd be happy to work for the next distribution to discuss that setup and see if it needs to be adjusted and what factors are taken into account. The second on the 3% reserve, again, is a reserve in our, what I have been saying to agencies across the state of Indiana is a management reserve. It is setting aside dollars in the event that revenues decrease for some reason throughout the fiscal year, or there is a large increase in expenditures that is unexpected. And so this 3% management reserve is a set aside in the event that something happens. What I have been saying is, as we go throughout the fiscal year, if we see revenues doing well and we see expenditures stabilizing, our office would revisit that policy and see if there's areas that we could release the reserve in order to do some additional things, and this would be one of them. But for now, not knowing what the revenue looks like and only being a month and a half into the general fund revenue, we have asked all agencies to participate in the 3% management reserve. There has been exceptions requested, and we have reviewed those, and we'll continue to look at that to see where we can release based on revenues coming in and expenditures.
Have we done any release of reserves, like for last year?
I would have to check with our staff, but there were instances where agencies did run into some issues at the end of the fiscal year where we did release reserves or waive the reserves in order for them to either pay personnel costs or do some projects or IT-related issues. So we have in past, and again, only here 7 months, but as we closed out the fiscal year for 17, we did release reserves or waive reserves based on the needs by certain agencies.
Budget Director Dudich, how do you treat the other statewide office holders in this process? I know that there's been some debate back and forth over the years about that. What approach are you all using with respect to that situation?
With separately elected offices, my understanding in coming into this role is that we make a request to those separately elected officials to participate in our spending plan process to understand what their needs will be throughout the fiscal year, and also to set aside some amount of money as agencies under the executive branch. So we make that available to the separately elected agencies on the spending plan, the management reserve. We request that. But we also understand that the authority of my office can only go so far, and mandating that or putting that in place sometimes is more of a difficult challenge. So we ask them to participate. We talk about the needs within the state overall. Sometimes they do revert dollars just in general from underspending, but we try to work with them on a regular basis to develop spending plans. But there's some limitations that we have on that, Mr. Chairman.
It might be beneficial over time, particularly as you approach the next budget cycle, for you to give members of the Budget Committee and the alternates some kind of a review as to which of the other statewide office holders do participate in any way or do have their own plan to set aside reserves or things of that nature.
Be happy to do that.
Senator Mishler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the formula maybe based on media market? I'm going back to Representative Brown's comment, because like Fort Wayne is larger than South Bend, but South Bend has a much larger media market. So is the formula based on the size of the media market maybe?
You know, rather than misspeak, I think what I need to do is see if I can find some historic notes that tell the rationale behind the formula. I can tell you exactly how the formula works. The whole rationale, I don't have top of mind, Senator, so I don't want to misspeak. I will look into that, and we're happy to revisit that.
Any other comments? Yes, Senator Italian.
Thank you. So, Jason, thanks for your comments and explanation about that. Sometime I wonder if you could just explain, and it doesn't have to be right now, you know, in order for you to allow that 3% holdback to be released to somebody like this, you know, when do you review it? How much better do your numbers have to be in order to get that released? you know, if we could talk about that at some point.
Absolutely, happy to do that. And my preference is to educate and provide as much information as possible so that you and others on the committee understand our position and why we do that. So I'm more than happy to, Senator.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Well, Roger, we appreciate the good programming that you put out, both over the radio and the TV, and we also appreciate your continued efforts to have programs that inform the public about statewide and state house activities. I think that's, you know, not, you may have to be a wonk in order to want to watch that stuff, but that's the kind of thing that we really need for the public to always have access to. So we appreciate your continued efforts to accomplish those things.
I appreciate those remarks, Senator. Thank you. And we will continue.
Thank you. Okay. Public Mass Transit Fund, Larry Buckle, you here? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Larry Buckle. I'm with the Indiana Department of Transportation. I'm the manager of the Office of Transit. I'm here to present the Public Mass Transportation Fund. We call it the PMTF. The PMTF is from the state's general fund to assist public transportation. Indiana has 64 public transit systems around the state. There are rural transit systems and urban transit systems. The allocation is $44 million. The way we distribute these funds, this $44 million we have an allocation method, and the method is each system is guaranteed a base level, and the base level, what we came up with, is what they received in 2014 and 15. We created a base. Also, NICTE, which I thought I heard you say you rode yesterday or last night, receives 12.34% from the top of the $44 million. And then the remaining funds, these are the funds above the base to the $44 million, is distributed by a performance-based formula. And the formula measures are one third of it is passenger trips per operating expense, 1/3 of it is total vehicle miles per operating expense, and another third is locally derived income per operating expense. And locally derived income is from the fare box or general funds or something from the systems. The funds will be used for calendar year 2018. The funds are used to match federal dollars, and the funds are paid to the systems on a reimbursement basis. And that's what I have. If you have any questions?
Any questions? This is a formula you could argue all day about.
Yeah. You plug one hole, you get another one.
All right. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, next, we set by statute a procedure for the Commission for Higher Education to make recommendations about tuition and fee targets. And you have a document in front of you that shows, it's about an 8-page document, and it shows how the Commission, what their thought process is, and detail about how they go about making these recommendations. And then the last page shows what their recommendations were. We don't happen to have a document here that shows what the actual action of the universities was, which is in their discretion, because the recommendations of the Commission for Higher Education is a non-binding recommendation. And for a number of years, I would say strongly in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of effort on the part of the legislature and the universities to deal with the rising cost of college education and the rising and the rates of increases of tuition and fees. And in addition, there's been a lot of discussion and concern about debt loads that students are carrying forward. And so we've all worked to attack that problem. And I really feel and have to articulate publicly that I think Indiana and its universities have probably done more on this particular subject than almost any other state in the nation, and that we have a particularly good record of being responsive to what I would call the relationship that we have to our customer, which is the student and the people who pay, which is quite often the student parents. And the universities did in large part, try to adhere or at least use as a guidepost the CHE recommendations. And there was one noticeable exception, and that was the University of Southern Indiana. And Dr. Bennett is here with us today. I asked her to come and explain their increase is 5% the first year and 4.9% the second year. Most of the other increases are under 2%. I think Vincennes is above 2%. And Dr. Bennett has been on a program for a few years where she and the trustees of USI have felt that their base was low enough that they probably needed to push harder to deal with providing the services they want for their undergraduate students, which I think is justifiable. And so we kind of, in a sense, have received the courtesy of an advance notice of, well, we think we need to be on a certain path, a certain pattern, but I felt like that the disparity was enough in the overall situation that we probably ought to ask Dr. Bennett to come and kind of explain their point of view and their perspective and what they're trying to do and what is the effort of this, and just as a matter of all of us working together to try to understand the subject. And she was gracious enough to be willing to get in a car and drive 6 hours up here from the farthest part of the state.
In all fairness, 5. Thelma was driving.
Well, we won't ask how fast she was going. But anyhow, I wanted to sort of preface your comments, Dr. Bennett, and thank you for being here. And we want to hear your thoughts, and obviously your thoughts impact our deliberations and our thoughts going forward about who needs what and how much when. And when you're always talking about money, it's always a tough subject, but I find that it's a much better practice to have a face-to-face discussion than it is to make some comment to somebody else on a third-party basis about who's doing what to who. So thank you for being here.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to have this exchange. I'm a political scientist by training, and I have to tell you, I taught public policy for many years, and sitting in the audience and listening to the wide range of interests that you have to keep in mind when it comes to husbanding the state's resources is something I think that's healthy to hear, because all are important functions, and I think that puts into context that in some ways we're all sitting in the nest saying more. And so part of what USI has been doing over the last several years is taking a look just structurally of where we stand with our two key resources. 95% of USI's revenue comes from two resources: tuition and fees and state appropriations. And when I first came into the presidency in 2009, it was in the wake of the worst recession that this nation had experienced since the 1930s. And you put together the fact that we're also the youngest of the statewide universities. I mean, we are 52 years old this year. As the youngest of the statewide universities, we developed very quickly. And so in many ways, we developed more quickly than resources could keep up with. And that's a challenge to certainly those making budget decisions with state appropriations. And then it was also, I think, difficult for us to keep up in terms of tuition and fees. So we made a decision about 5-6 years ago to have a very orderly plan. If you take a look, when I first came to USI almost 15 years ago, a number of the universities quickly increased their tuitions by $1,000 over a 1 to 2 year period of time. USI did not do that, and part of our DNA was affordability and trying to keep the cost low. And so what we did when we started taking a look at where our tuition stood relative to the other statewide institutions and what that was doing to our revenue base, we started thinking about how could we begin to position USI's tuition so that it was still within the affordable range within the state of Indiana. And indeed, if you've taken a look at the multi-state area, Indiana higher education is a great buy across all the institutions. There are some institutions in our neighboring areas wherein USI's out-of-state tuition is more affordable than that state's in-state tuition. But we wanted to take a look at, in terms of the reality of generating revenue, and how do we position ourselves so that we hold on to that affordability component, but still position ourselves for greater revenue. We took a look at across the institutions, and what we did is we developed this plan about 6-7 years ago, wherein we took a look at what were the regional campuses' tuition rates, and plus Indiana State. Indiana State is our mother campus. We were a branch campus of Indiana State until 1985. And there are a lot of similarities between USI and Indiana State University. So we took those numbers and said, okay, if we could come to the average of that tuition, what would it take over a period of time? We did not want to do it all in one tranche, because that kind of increase, that sharp, even $1,000 in 1 year increase for our students and their families is a significant increase. So we wanted to stage it over a period of years to build it in. I will say for the 17-19 biennium, as my team met last summer to talk about this plan and implementing it, as I sat down with my team, in all honesty, they did not know I was retiring, but I did. And I wanted to complete this on my watch. I did not want to pass this off to my successor. And so if you take a look at the impact, and I realize the percentage, and again, I talk with Commissioner Lubbers many times, and we have a strong relationship with Commissioner Lubbers and the commission staff. And what we entered into was a plan. Basically, we were looking at the number, the amount of revenue, and the actual dollars. And that has been our plan. And with the 17-19 biennium, we wrap up that plan. We come to that point where we are nestled right in that area of that average of the regional campuses plus Indiana State. We are still one of the most affordable campuses in this state, even after that increase. And that increase took in about a 3.9% increase in the base tuition for the next 2 years, and also a $2.50 increase per credit hour on the technology fee. Most states around campus have a $10 to $11 charge per credit hour. We were at $5. And we are doing the same thing all the other campuses are doing. We're looking at things like cybersecurity, protection of our data, and we're also dealing with students coming in with phones, iPads, Xboxes, every conceivable technology that you can think of. And that puts real strain on the kinds of services that we can provide. So we're looking to make certain that they can access all that they need in terms of what they are doing on campus, but also that we ramp up, and we've been in consultation with security consultants for a period of time now to make certain that we're also doing what we have to do to maintain the security of our networks. So really, if I am sitting in your seat, I'm asking the same questions. Yes, we do look like an outlier. What we were looking at were the overall dollars and how to position the university moving ahead. Because if we had stayed where we were 8 years ago, and if you have assigned percentage ranges of what you can do with tuition, you will not only forever maintain a gap, you will widen it, because it is a percentage base on a percentage of a much lower base. And so part of what we were trying to do was to position the university. We have some very expensive programs, you're aware of that. We're strong in terms of the health professions and nursing, and we have engineering. And so we were trying to position ourselves so that we can provide the kind of support to those students that we felt we had to do in order to be competitive. Now, let me say about debt. structure of students, because we worry about that as well, because about 28% of our students are Pell eligible. But there's a large portion of our students who are working class, lower middle class. According to the federal formula, their families should be giving X thousands of dollars to their education, and those families can't afford it. So part of what we're looking at as well is how to help those who fall between the cracks of not being eligible for federal aid and perhaps not receiving other types of merit-based aid. So we're looking at those issues as well. But the average debt load of a USI graduate is around $21,000. The national average is $30,000 to $36,000. I get different figures. The statewide average is around $29,000. 33% of our graduates complete their education, complete their degree, 33% with no debt. Another 11% complete with less than $10,000 in debt. So that's something that we constantly look at. The affordability goal, and this is very consistent with the Commission for Higher Education. The affordability element is really important to us. This was not an effort to ignore the reality of our students and their families or the leadership from the Commission for Higher Education. So the effort was to position the university so it could function moving ahead in a more reasonable way. And, you know, I used to tell folks for many years, I mean, coming and seeing that we had the lowest appropriation and the lowest tuition, and I felt like Alison Krauss. Alison Krauss, one of my favorites, she sings all the pity poor me songs. And we were determined not to do that any longer. We were determined to say, what can we do? What can we do to strengthen ourselves and to position ourselves better? I took a look at our appropriations through our budget process. We have a public budget process on campus as well. I took a look at, if you took a look at the tranche of items that we have funded that are new lines, permanent initiatives, not the one time, and I would leave out the salary increase, because a 2% salary pull on our campus is about $1.4 million. But if you take a look at all the initiatives that we had that, you know, you need a position here or there, came to a little over $1 million, we funded 80% of that through reallocation, internal reallocation, because that's what we are constantly doing, is taking a look at what do we need to stop doing so that we can move ahead in some of these other areas. So I come gladly in order to explain this in terms of what the thinking at the university level was. The trustees were very supportive of this move, and we had been talking with our trustees for the last several years in terms of what our goal was, in terms of positioning ourselves. And I will say, the size of the increase for the next 2 years in terms of percentage increase. Now, that percentage increase results in a cost to the student for a full-time Hoosier student taking 15 semester hours per semester for 2 semesters is a little over $300, somewhere between $350, $360 a year. And we kept looking at the dollar amounts in terms of how do our students manage that as we move ahead. We're going to be implementing something that our CFO has developed, and it's called a financial care team. And the financial care team he wants to really repurpose his office in terms of the collections officers away from a passive notion of collections and into a more active notion of financial advisors, flagging students who are beginning to accumulate a fair amount of debt early in the semester, sitting down with them, taking a look at their individual case to see if are there other private monies, are there other ways in which they can build down that debt while still in college, including on-campus employment. And I think these are the kinds of things we're mindful of as we move ahead in structuring where we stood with our tuition and fees. And so I really welcome this opportunity to come here and to say, this is what we were thinking of. It was not in any way to ignore the leadership from either the commission or the sage advice of those here in your body, in the legislative body. It was positioning the institution so that we could move ahead, and I felt a sense of urgency, knowing that as of this year, I will then pull away for a new president to come into that seat with, I think, a much better positioned place for the university moving ahead.
Questions, comments? Budget Director Dudich.
Thank you. First, Dr. Bennett, thank you for your service to Indiana and USI. I don't know if you'll be in front of this group over the next 11 or so months, but if not, thank you for your service. And on behalf of Governor Holcomb, we congratulate you and wish you the best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm not a clapper, so I'm glad Senator Talley threw me up on that. I also want to talk about the balance of the roles, your role as an institution, your board of trustees thinking long-term and strategically about the financial position of your university, the commission's role that they have in this rather new in terms of the history of the commission and the institutions. The tuition setting process is relatively new, and the General Assembly's role in understanding the impact that has on students and the state support. So appreciate that balance that your board and you bring and your staff bring, the role that this group has in terms of understanding the impact it has on students in the state, and then the commission's role in what they do, and Commissioner Lovers. So again, appreciate that strategy and long-term that you took on this approach. And I know that you and Cindy didn't sit in a room and figure this out on your own. You're very public about that, and your board is very engaged. So I appreciate that. Again, long-term vision of how you're improving the students' experience and the benefit to Indiana at USI. So thank you.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Let me add my congratulations. How long have you been at USI now?
I'm starting my 15th year. I was a provost for the first 6 years, and I'll be president. I'll end up serving 9 years.
Well, I think clearly USI, along with some of our other universities, has just made immeasurable progress in that period of time. And if leadership is going to take all the darts, they should get some of the credit too. So we thank you for all that you've done there, and wish you the best in your future. You and I had a brief conversation the other day, and one of the thoughts that I shared with you was the idea that being college president is a pretty big job, and it requires skills not only with a commitment to academics and to the students, but it's a management job, it's a fundraising job. There are just a lot of dimensions to this, and that makes the job interesting to talented people. So that's good. I hope you will share your experience in the university selection process of the next president. And you mentioned that 95% of your revenues come from either an appropriation or tuition. And now that I don't know if it's going to be possible because of the type of student that you have had and you do have, but having been there 50 years now, I think it's going to be almost incumbent on you or the university to start figuring out how you build some kind of an endowment. And I know that sounds a little bit at odds with maybe the population you're dealing with, but I hope you will give them the benefit of your thoughts on that particular process. And then the other thought that I had was, knowing your management style, I'm sure that you have gone through your course offerings or your degree offerings, and you've winnowed out, hopefully, those areas where maybe they're not really doing anything productive. I know Indiana State, we had a particular problem 7 or 8 years ago, and there was some low-hanging fruit that needed to be taken care of on those fronts. And so part of the equation is not only how much money do we raise, but how much money do we spend, and how do we control our costs. And so hopefully you can help give some guidance to the future on those fronts. And I know it's taken some courage to raise tuition. It'll also take some courage to maybe tell some of the faculty that we have some opportunities to control costs as a realistic necessity. So I hope you'll do all those things in your remaining time.
May I
And,
respond to a couple of those?
please.
In terms of endowment, without question, private fundraising has been important. We had a very successful capital campaign that we just
Great.
closed out last year.
Great.
Our goal was 57 million. We brought in 57.
That's great.
And in terms of just looking at things down to the granular level in the curriculum, we went from a core curriculum that was 50 credit hours down to one that was 39. And the faculty led that process and
Good.
took that on. And that was a tremendous difference in terms of taking a look at just the overall curriculum and what we are doing, and taking a look at how much of this is really essential in terms of the educational experience.
That's great. And you know, competition is what makes us all do all these things. And it is hard to deal with that and to deal with change, but it always makes us better if we'll just respond and try to do something better out of it. Other questions? Or Senator Italian?
Thank you. Thank you for your service. You mentioned a number, you said something about $360 a year would be the student cost.
Somewhere in the 360, 370, I think. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figure in front of me.
Okay, I'm just wondering, is that the extra over the recommended?
Yes.
That's the extra?
That's the extra over the previous tuition level.
Okay, so it's not, so it includes the 1.4 or whatever it is that the CHE recommended. and
Well, yes,
then-
our increase on the base tuition from last year was 3.9%.
Right, but so some of this 360 would be included within the 1.4 that CHE already recommended.
Right.
So you're only
Above that by,
a couple $100.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Chairman Brown?
Thank you. Appreciate you being here, and I know I haven't been involved with working with you for the 9 years you've been president, but I certainly enjoy the short tenure I've been here. Appreciate it. You know, I kind of look at what's the impact that you've done. You know, have applications stayed robust for USI in the face of these increases?
You know, right when we were starting to implement this tuition plan, we also implemented we raised the admission standards. And so for a while, our applications were affected by that. And in fact, I would say in terms of admissions, it probably affected us by about 300, maybe more students a year for a while. But now we are seeing an upswing. We're really pleased. Last fall, we had an increase. This fall, we have an increase in new freshmen. Our online graduate program in business is just breaking all that we expected, all of our expectations. So we'll have a sharp increase in graduate students, an increase in new freshmen, and even an increase by the hair of our chinny chin chin of transfer students, which if you consider, our transfer pipeline was fed by community colleges. We have strong partnerships with the Ivy Tech system, with the Eastern Illinois system, and with the Kentucky system. And all of them have been reeling in terms of enrollments. So the fact that we're able to also maintain that in transfer. So yes, our applications are looking healthy. We're pleased. The profile of the student has changed over these past 5 years. And with all the other requisite things in working with the commission, for instance, on their goals in terms of increasing on-time graduation rates, even our at-risk students, if you took a look at us over the last 10 years, those students eligible for Pell, we've increased by 100% the number graduating on time with their degree. So we feel as if we're on the right track. And yes, the volume, the visits to campus, and we use several markers, you know, visits to campus along with applications, they're up, and we're really excited.
And I know one of the things I think when I first started was, I believe you made the statement back in 13 that you had quite a bit of part-time professors.
Yes.
And one of the things with tuition increases was to look at that indicator, because that was one of the quality indicators that your peer group looks at.
Yep.
Any comment on that?
And yes, we still have a high proportion, though it's gotten less. We have fewer adjunct faculty, but we still have more adjunct faculty, and they do a great job. But if you look at persistence of students, your percentage of full-time faculty are closely tied to that because they're able to be there. It's not a matter, I mean, our adjunct faculty are talented, we're grateful to have them, but they're not able to be there for the kind of time it takes to interact with students. So that remains work to be done. We've made some real progress in colleges where we had both overloads for full-time faculty. You have to keep in mind our faculty teaching load is 12 semester hours. That's usually 4 classes a semester. And some of them were even on overload, certainly in the College of Science, Engineering, and Education. We've built that down. We've built down the adjuncts in that college, and that's made a big difference. But it's work still to do, quite frankly. We still need to build down and have more full-time faculty.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for not only helping the explanation with the specific point, but occasionally we go through all of this detailed work and we're focused on the numbers, and I think it's good to try to focus, draw back and have a discussion about the general situation, and this kind of presented an opportunity to do that as well.
I really appreciated the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Last item on the review items is the PDIF fund summary from the Board of Depositories. And is Ryan Locke here? There's Ryan, General Counsel for the Treasurer. Ryan, I asked that we kind of ask you to come in here because I read through the report and it all looks like everything's in good shape. The only sort of question that I had was that there are a couple of institutions that are required to have 100% collateralization. And my question was, I thought if those institutions who are in that category, does the Department of Financial Institutions or do you share this information with them, and do we kind of look at those institutions to make sure that they are give them some scrutiny so that we have good, sound banking practices going forward? And that's the thrust of my question. So if you could just kind of focus on that, that's what I'd like to know about.
Sure, and thank you very much for having me here today. This is my first time in front of a committee like this, so thank you for that.
Oh, you should have never said that.
Yeah, no, and feel free to razz me or give me how you will, but it's a great question. And kind of just as an overview to start, I think it's good to kind of just reassess. I know this is a thing that we don't think about every single day. I do, but you guys may not. But the BFD and the PDIF are here to make sure that these systems that have been set up since 1937 as an accountability process for depositories and then also public funds that are being invested into depositories around the state are being taken care of and are done in a way that keeps the market open and that local governments and state government can invest these funds with confidence to make sure that the people of the state of Indiana are getting what they need. So to your question about the 2 depositories that are on our collateral system now, which was set up in 2010 to kind of help cover some and mitigate some of the losses that may occur if a depository were to fail, we do track those on a daily basis once into the collateral system. So the way the fund operates and the way the BFD operates on top of that is we ask for quarterly reports to see these numbers, and that's what you see for the majority of the depositories in the system. Once a depository falls below a specific credit rating, which is the Highline rating that we apply through SNL Financial, that credit rating is 39 and below, they fall into our collateral system and must deliver to the BFD the 50% or 100% depending on what their rating is. Once that happens, they have to send us daily reports on their public funds on deposit and the collateral that they've delivered to us so that we can make sure that they're
Okay.
helping cover that.
As an informal measure, do you also, and they may already have access or may be aware of in any of these situations, but do you share that information with the Department of Financial Institutions to make sure that they are also monitoring?
Yeah, so Mr. Fight is on our board. They have
Okay.
oversight of the process.
So you have a direct connection?
Yes,
Okay.
and they have more day-to-day access to those numbers than we do.
Great.
So we, as the BFD, as the PDIF, take our numbers from the depositories themselves and then review them. And if there's an issue, if we see that somebody hasn't delivered collateral on a timely basis, we can then track them down, call them, make sure that they're doing the things they need to.
Okay.
If something were to arise that failure is imminent, DFI is in a better situation to see that happen. They will see it before we do. They will tell us, and it will go from there. But we do work tandem with them to make sure that this runs.
Well, I thought it was probably worth giving you a day out of the office so we could be
No, absolutely.
be reassured about.
Thank you, and thanks for saving
what
us
that
for
plan
last.
is. Any
best
other
for last.
questions or comments on that issue? Thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
The only other item is reports received, and that was the Edge Tax Credit Report, which I think you all probably got. So are there any motions to remove items from the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda?
Been moved and seconded that we formally adopt the approved agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Deanna, do we have any further instructions? We're going to stand adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.